We're back.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't think you could get rid of us that easy, did ya?
Nope.
All right. So our expert analysis of the NFL is now transitioning into our expert analysis of college basketball.
Mm.
So we're 1 month. Well, the first four in Dayton is a little less than a month from now, and then the first Thursday of March Madness, when you get 16 games a day for a couple days, is March 21st.
Yay.
So we're a month away. Kind of smooth transition from NFL into college basketball. So for those interested, we'll talk about that and give our not so expert opinions on college basketball, and we'll keep this rolling. We'll just try to do this probably every Thursday or once a week. And like I said, keep it rolling. So bracketology, some of you listening to this or watching this are going to know a lot more than us, and some aren't going to have a clue what that even is. But so, I mean, obviously there's the bracket, right? There's 68 teams that make it into the NCAA tournament, Division I college basketball. And as teams win and lose throughout the year, it changes their projected position. And then on Selection Sunday, which is, I guess, March, whatever,
Mid-March.
17th, I think, is St. Patty's Day. So teams are going to be hoping to get lucky to get in on Selection Sunday. Selection Sunday, the committee that places the teams basically reveals their bracket. So they'll tell you who's in and who's out. And obviously, you can only accept 68 teams. A good amount of those teams are teams that have won not so great conferences. So those teams get an auto bid if they win their conference, and then the best remaining teams in the committee's eyes fill out the rest of the 68 team bracket. So that is March 17th. And of course, you've got hundreds of people throughout, I mean, thousands actually, probably, if not more than that, that have their projected brackets. They update them every few days and they try to get it exactly right because they want to, I don't know, be famous or just, be competitive against other bracketologists. So if you like following such things, there's a website called bracketmatrix.com that it basically compares all of the best bracketologists from the last so many years and just ranks them if you like that. So if you want to see the guy's bracket who did the best over the last 5 years, it has him ranked right at the top, and you can go look at his, which I have up right now. I started following a guy, I don't know, probably about 5 years ago or maybe more. And I just kind of follow his bracket. The thing that you'll find if you go to bracketmatrix.com, the first thing you're going to see is all of the brackets and all of the seeds of all the different teams. And you're going to notice that almost everything is very, very close. Where you get ranked higher as a bracketologist is if the closer you get to like a perfect bracket, putting everyone in the right region, getting everyone's seed right. That's obviously where you get ranked higher. But I guess if you're looking for, is my team going to make it? Where are they at? You can literally click any of these bracketologists and it's going to give you a pretty good idea of where they sit within a few spots. So I used to live in Nebraska. Nebraska's kind of on the bubble. They had a huge win last night. Well, not a huge win, but their first road,
right?
Indiana.
They beat Northwestern too, though, didn't they? Before that, must have been before
maybe.
That. I think they did.
So this was their first road win in the Big Ten, which the committee wants you to be able to win on the road or at neutral sites because that's where the tournament's played. So it's a better predictor of whether you're going to be able to be more competitive in the tournament. So
no, I was totally wrong. They lost to Northwestern and then they ripped off 3 more. Michigan, Penn State, and Indiana.
So they beat Indiana, which Indiana's not going to make the tournament most likely, but it's a road win. So this is the time where they need to kind of separate themselves from some of these other bubble teams, and that was a good way to do it. So you might hear some people talk about quad wins. So there's 4 quadrants. So a quad 1 win is against the best teams, basically. Quad 2 is against the second tier teams and then on down. So if you're losing to bad teams, obviously quad 4 losses are really bad. Quad 1 wins are the best. And there's so many different metrics and ways to rank these teams. So you have a bunch of people just trying to basically tell you what they think the committee's going to do when they release the bracket. Okay, that's enough about bracketology.
Can I just say something really quick?
No.
Okay. Top 5 in the Big Ten, 2023-2024 season. Illinois, Wisconsin, Northwestern, and Nebraska.
Yeah.
I mean, that is not, when you think Big Ten basketball powerhouses, that's not the list.
Michigan State,
Indiana,
probably Ohio State.
Ohio State has had some success, certainly.
Purdue.
I mean, yeah. I mean, Katie is certainly one of the legendary coaches for all of his lack of a title or Final Fours or.
But Purdue's been top 2 or 3 in the Big Ten
recently, yes, last 5 years.
Yeah.
Painter's been awesome. He's exactly what you want, right? You get a guy who went to your school and has a tie to the program, also happens to be an excellent coach, and doesn't leave for fucking North Carolina or Duke. That's what you want.
But the thing with him is, like, why can't he win in March? Like, there's got to be something, because he's always got the talent. Like, they're always like, seems like they've been a top,
I don't know, man,
5 team the last 3-4 years or close to it, and then they just.
Well, his best shot was, I think, when Virginia won, and they had that amazing. I think it was the Elite 8 game, and it went to double overtime. It was Jaden Ivey. That was when Jaden Ivey, I think, ascended. That wasn't Jaden. That was somebody else even. Shorter guy went to Boston. But anyway, yeah, they've been great. I think it's Edey. Honestly, like, I know he's good and dominant, but like I don't think he's good enough. I don't think teams built around plotting centers, regardless of how big they are viable.
I don't know. Yeah, I suppose, like, he's a matchup problem for a lot of teams, but when you get into the tournament, they're gonna have guys who can guard him, and then it's kind of like you don't have the unicorn anymore to just kind of take over the game. But
and it's a guard, like, they always say, I think, like, success in the tournament is guard play, right? When you think about what drives a team to victory, it's like guards taking over. Like when was it Kemba Walker, in UConn when what's his nuts won his last championship. He just, like, they were nothing in the regular season. Then once Kemba got into the tournament, he just ate everybody's lunch.
Yeah, they won 2 of them within like they won one, then they didn't win, and then the next year they won.
Kevin Ollie came in and won, yeah, and then they fired him because he was cheating. And he's now the interim coach of the Brooklyn Nets, I believe. So there you go.
Interesting. Yeah, that was a crazy year when UConn. So they won the Big East tournament, and then they won the NCAA tournament, and
ran through it.
Before the Big East tournament started that year, there was some talk about, is it tougher to win the Big East tournament or the NCAA tournament? And like, you think that's a stupid question, but the Big East was really good that year. So your first round game, let's just say you're going to be a 1 or a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament. Well, your first round game is going to be very easy compared to a first round game in the Big East tournament because everyone in the Big East was good, right? So then your second round game, you get an 8 seed, which is going to be a tough matchup in the NCAA tournament. But I think where you see where I'm going, like, every matchup kind of in both tournaments was, at that time was going to be a tough matchup, and you had to win 5 games to win the Big East tournament at that point too. And
it was like 20 teams in that league almost.
And so I think they were even talking about UConn at that point. They're like, would it be tougher for UConn to win the Big East tournament or the national tournament? And then they won both back to back. They ripped off 5 in the Big East, and then they won, what is it? You have to win 6 in the NCAA tournament. So, that was interesting. Right. So, I mean, the big talk at this point is always the bubble, because it's like, is your team going to get in? Are they not going to get in? And you'll hear some people say, well, who really cares? Like, are any of those teams going to win it all? So some people want to talk about who has a legitimate chance to win it all, who has, other people really like the bubble talk. They want to see if their team gets in, or they want to see who doesn't make it, gets snubbed or whatever. And then, both of those conversations to me are interesting. I do like the bubble conversation a little bit now at this point, and then once the tournament, once you get to the Sweet 16, then all the pretenders are done, and then you start talking about who can really win a national championship. So, one of the guy that I had been following, which he had the best overall bracket in like 2015 or something like that. So I think that's why I started following him. It looks like his score is not as great anymore. Like he's in the 70s of overall bracketologist, which is still really good. Like if I tried to do a bracket and look at all the bracketing principles and whatnot, I wouldn't come close probably to some of these guys. So, and like I said, a lot of them are very similar. So I'm just pulling up his bracket, and obviously you can't see this, but he has first four out, next four out, and then he has basically last four or last four buys, and then last four in. So it's basically the 16 teams that are jostling for position to actually get into the tournament.
Whoa, so sorry, I'm just looking at this. I've not seen this before. He's got Gonzaga out of the tournament.
Yeah, they really don't have any good. They just beat Kentucky at Kentucky, and that's by far their best win. They beat UCLA and USC, who are both very down. But yeah, it's one of those, like, it's a product of them not, like, usually they schedule a little bit harder, but still, like, they were thinking UCLA and USC would be decent, and like beating those teams would be good. And then another thing, I mean, they lost to St. Mary's at home, so that was a chance to get a decent win, but they just don't have the win. Like, they have a lot of wins, they just don't have wins against good teams. So I still think they're going to get in. They still have to play St. Mary's at St. Mary's. That would be a quad one win. And obviously the West Coast Conference tournament is coming up, and if they're still probably the favorite, or them and St. Mary's are the favorites to win that tournament. So, like, obviously that's an auto bid if they win their tournament. But
they're a 20 win team too. That's weird. I mean, St. Mary's. Oh wow, that'd just be so odd to not have a tournament without Gonzaga. Like,
yeah. So what we're looking at is showing Gonzaga as the second team out. So, like, if two more teams kind of fell off, then Gonzaga would get in. So, I mean, there's a lot of basketball left to be played. I mean, the first conference tournament doesn't start for about a week and a half, and that's some of the smaller conferences, and the bigger ones aren't going to start here until, for another 3 weeks or so. But yeah, that's definitely interesting considering they've made it, 23 years in a row or something.
I mean, I can't remember a tournament without Gonzaga, right? Like, since Dan Munson ran that program in the late 90s, I think they've been a tournament mainstay. Yeah. And I mean, it's you think about what the conference was at the time, right? It's a very, very small conference. So I guess it makes sense that they were able to dominate it, but wow, that is staggering, seismic.
And you talked about Painter staying at Purdue and not taking the big job, and that's what Mark Few has done at Gonzaga.
That's
too.
right.
And I mean, obviously that's why they've been so consistent over the last however many years he's been there. But so the team right ahead of them is Cincinnati. They just lost to Oklahoma State last night, which is an awful loss. Oklahoma State is pretty bad. So Gonzaga, again, there's so many, teams are playing 2-3 games a week. There's so much movement up and down, but that's a horrible loss by Cincinnati. Gonzaga was idle. Gonzaga is going to move up for sure. Other teams on the list, I'm just trying to think, like, and this hasn't been updated. Like, this guy will probably put out an update maybe by noon today. This was last updated, the one we're looking at 2 days ago. But other teams like Wake Forest, I think Wake Forest just blew out Pittsburgh on what was it, like Tuesday? So they'll move up. They're in the first four out, kind of along the same lines as Gonzaga. And then who else in there? Villanova is in the next 4 out.
Nova.
They just beat Butler, who is projected a tournament team, so they're going to move up. Who else? So
another one too there is Drake. So I know nobody cares about the Missouri Valley, but Drake has been an amazing team in the Missouri Valley for years. And right now they're out, and Indiana State is in.
Yeah,
and that's weird too. That's a lot of. That's unusual for that conference. That jumped out at me too.
Yeah, Indiana State was ranked for the first time since Larry Bird or something like that. And they've got this goofy dude with like goggles who's like
a big guy, right? Like a rotund, very substantive young man.
Yeah. He's not super toned muscle wise, but he's a big dude.
Very large.
He can do it all. He's just like
that's grace to him.
Larry Bird wasn't as big as this guy. Well, wasn't like as stout, but they both kind of have like non-athletic builds, and it's kind of, people are drawing parallels there, but this guy can do everything. Like he can shoot, bang down ball.
He's a big body. It'll be fun to see him in the tournament.
So they are ahead in the Mountain West, or wait, not
Missouri Valley,
not Mountain West. There's so many conferences.
They all sound the same.
Right. So Drake is on the bubble. On the outside looking in right now, and then Indiana State is the auto bid because they're in first currently, but you're probably going to see, those two teams will face off in their conference championship, and you're probably going to see only 1 out of 2 of those get in, but
2-bid league.
You can already see the storyline on this Indiana State team with kind of the goofy dude. You can already see that kind of building, and then like the Larry Bird stuff. So, we kind of said during the NFL analysis that you can't really screw up the Super Bowl, and I feel like March Madness is the same way. Like, because every team that makes it, in a way deserves to be there. They either won their conference tournament or, they're an at-large team that did enough during the regular season to make it. I talked about Nebraska. They haven't made the tournament in like almost 10 years at this point, and they're the only. I think this is right. They're the only Power 5 team to never win a March Madness tournament game. So if they make it, that'll be a big storyline.
Go Hoiberg.
Yeah, you got Hoiberg there, who's been there for like maybe 5 years, and he hasn't made it yet.
Probably not getting fired.
Yeah. Well, I think they extended him last year, a couple years.
That doesn't mean anything nowadays.
True.
It's like,
well, right.
Fire his ass and move on.
He's not financially unstable by any means, but you always, as a coach, you always like that a little bit of cushion on the back end. So, who else we got here? So Mississippi, the last 4 in, according to this, they have Seton Hall, Butler, Providence, and Mississippi. So this was before Butler lost to Providence. So, or not Providence, Butler lost to Villanova. So Butler is probably going to move down a little bit. Villanova moves up a little bit. Who else on that list? Seton Hall just played, I think. I'm not sure who they played, if they won or lost. But Texas A&M is barely in, and they just lost at home, I think, to a non-tourney team. So they're going to move down. You can slice and dice this all day if you wanted to, but one thing I will mention, if you're following bracketology, this year the bubble seems way more volatile than it normally is at this point. Like a team that beats maybe a mediocre team or like a slightly above average team might move up like 5 spots in like the seed list. Whereas in a normal year, sometimes that will barely move you up, maybe a spot or 2, or maybe keep you even because there's so many teams that are kind of jockeying for position. But it seems like the bubbles, I don't know if you want to call it soft or volatile. You're on the bubble, so to speak, and you can rip off 3-4 wins against some decent teams. Like you're gonna find yourself in the tournament just because the resumes of a lot of these teams just aren't super strong this year.
No, it's an interesting time to become a college basketball fan, or if you've been one for a long time, it's also an interesting time. All of these old guard coaches with a vast weight of their championship rings have all just left. within the last 3 or 4 years. Boeheim is gone. Krzyzewski is gone. Roy Williams is gone. Jay Wright is gone.
Yeah.
The winning the only guy left really is Izzo in Michigan State.
Yeah.
You know, Calhoun left 10 years ago. The guy from UConn who I forgot. Like Bill Self is now the old man of college basketball.
Yeah, it seems like people will draw parallels between like the NIL stuff and like coaches leaving. Like Boeheim was very outspoken about how it's ruining
He
basketball.
was almost 80.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he was in his 70s. Like at some point you retire.
Yeah, he's like a turtle crawling around out there. Like he's, a couple 100 years old, just kind of continues to coach. Well, he's gone now, but
yeah.
Yeah, like I don't know if this is an actual thing, but this is what comes to my mind when I'm talking about the volatility of the bubble and the bracket. Like the NIL stuff where these top universities are in the transfer portal where you don't have to sit out. Like these top programs can pull these top players from some of these mid-major schools from year to year. And then it just kind of it makes these top mid-major programs, or maybe even like the bottom schools in these big conferences, it just like waters down their talent pool, I feel like. And I don't have any evidence, I didn't research this, but I want to say it kind of that leads to the bubble being a little bit softer. Like those teams just aren't as consistent, they just don't have as much talent because all these guys are going to these top programs to try to win a championship or get noticed to try to make it to the next level. So half the people you talk to will say they love NIL, and the other half will say it's kind of ruining things.
That's why I think it is basketball, college basketball, I think is just different. The impact is going to be different than say in football, just because you only need 5 guys, 6 guys. You know, in football, you've got to field a roster of, what is it? I know in NFL it's like 53. It's probably close to 100, or in college. You need 5 guys in basketball. I think the migratory nature of of college basketball now because of NILs will be, I think it'll be mitigated because of that. And you can still concentrate talent, even if it's not your top tier talent across 5 guys, you can still win. I think what makes college basketball exciting is that Cinderella mentality. And I think you'll still see that. I mean, you've seen it just within the regular season, the volatility of all these number 1 seeds just going down, like on the road against really what I would say subpar, like conference talent. Think about Purdue losing to Ohio State. Ohio State's not good this year, and they just went out and lost after being number 1. I think UConn did the same thing. Kansas did that a few weeks back. I don't know. I think college basketball will be more resilient to that than football.
Yeah, and well, the Ohio State win.
Yeah.
We always said this in the NFL with like coaches getting fired.
Yep.
So Holtman got fired at Ohio State,
Yeah.
and then what happened? They beat Purdue at home, right? Like it lit a fire. It's just like a psychological thing, like, oh, like breath of fresh air, like a change, whether the players liked Holtman or not, or whatever. It's just like now it's like, oh, now we have something to play for. Let's go beat number 1. Why not?
Yeah.
So that's interesting. And you mentioned, only needing 5 guys. So that's actually kind of interesting. You also mentioned like guard play in the tournament, which are a couple things that I think are very important. So
important.
Kansas is one of those teams that, I mean, they're a top tier team again this year, but they're not deep at all. If you listen to any analyst talk, they basically go 6 or 7 deep. So that's the reason why they've gotten blown out a couple times on the road in the Big 12 because
so competitive right now, the Big 12.
Yeah, by far the best conference.
I was just going to ask, is that the best conference? I mean, they look so good. Baylor, Houston, Iowa State, like Kansas is still really good. Like they've got 2 national titles on that team or on that conference out of the last 5 years. Like that's a conference to watch for sure.
Right. So back to Kansas, like, they go on the road and you get in a little foul trouble, or you got a couple guys not really producing, and that's why they've lost a lot of games on the road. They're still very good at what's it called, Fog Allen Fieldhouse.
Yep, that's it.
They beat Houston. They've beaten some of the best teams in the Big 12 and in the country there. They beat UConn at home. So Kansas is a very interesting one to watch. I don't see them making a deep run just because they aren't deep. And I don't feel like you can stay out of foul trouble game to game enough to just, make a run. But they'll be interesting to see if they can make a run, what seed they'll get. They're listed as the last 2 seed at this point, so that could change. You could see them moving down to a 3, or I guess maybe moving up to a 1, although I don't think they would get there at this point. And then
they have to win their conference tournament for that to happen.
Yeah, and then another team that I think of that, like, you hear, they're kind of flying under the radar, but on the opposite side of actually having depth would be Auburn, because like you hear analysts say, well, they have 2 of everything, right? Like they got 2 big guys, they got 2 good wings, they got 2 2 good point guards, they got 2 good shooting guards. So a team like that, even if they get into a little bit of foul trouble and whatnot, they got another guy that can come in that's just as productive. So they're an interesting team to me just because they're projected a 4 seed. But if you look at, here's another website I'm going to drop here, but kenpom.com. So Ken Pomeroy, his rankings, he basically ranks the teams by how likely they are to win, essentially. So if you're number 1, basically you're probably going to be favored against any team that you play on a neutral court. And then kind of on down the line. So it's just an advanced like ranking system essentially, but I'm going to pull that up real quick. So Auburn's projected a 4 seed, but if you look at the KenPom rankings, they're number 5 overall. And a lot of that, I mean, they've beaten good teams, and sometimes KenPom factors in margin of victory, maybe even to a fault a little bit. So they've blown out some really good teams. So they're a very interesting kind of case study because they're going to most likely get a 4 or a 5 seed. But if you like, if they're matched up against one of the best teams in the country, the chances of it being a very competitive game are good. So
Pearl's a good coach for all of his sliminess.
Yeah, for sure. So and then kind of along the same lines, you've got like Iowa State's 9th in the KenPom rankings, which seems a little odd. Like it's Iowa State. Like they make the tournament a lot, but they're not usually like a upper echelon like elite team. So that I mean that's another team in there. Who else was I looking at? Well, going back to the guard play and like upperclassmen guard play, you always see a couple teams in the tournament who aren't as good as other teams, but they have those guards who have been there before, and they seem to just pull off a couple upsets because of that. Sometimes you get a couple of these elite programs, but they got a couple freshman guards in there, and a team starts hitting threes against them, and it seems like they just don't know what to do, and they'll drop a game early in the tournament. So recently, Miami's made a couple runs. They had good guard play, good upperclassmen with Wong and I forget the other guy's name, but is it Nigel Pack or whatever? And Miami's down this year. They're not going to make the tournament, but the last 2 years they've made 2 Sweet 16s, and they made the Elite 8 2 years ago, I think.
I believe that's right, yeah.
Before Kansas told them to go home. So, yeah, I mean, junior and senior guards can
veteran teams.
Yeah,
veteran
teams. Yeah, definitely.
Yep.
That's one thing Iowa State does not have on their side. They're very young compared to most of these teams. So another interesting case study. Can Iowa State make a run with a lot of youth talent, and not usually being talked about as one of the top teams or like a team that can actually contend for a title. So I'm just looking at, like, if you're looking at teams that are going to win it all, I mean, UConn and Purdue have kind of been talked about as the top, like, the top overall seed. Those two are kind of jockeying for that, which is interesting because Purdue just lost to Ohio State and UConn just lost to Creighton.
Yep.
Both road losses, and the Purdue loss is worse than the UConn loss just because Creighton
Good team.
has had really good success lately and in the tournament, and they're a ranked team. Like Creighton's
Yep.
no joke.
Nope.
You want to talk about a team who's got upperclassmen, guards, who
Yep.
can
Experienced
score.
coach, veteran coach, been around.
Yeah, Shireman and Alexander.
Mhm.
Like if you're looking for a team in your
Yep.
bracket to kind of go a little ways,
Yep.
that's one you're definitely going to want to circle. But yeah, back to winning it all. So the 4-1 seeds at this point are Connecticut, Purdue, Houston, and Arizona. If you look at the KenPom rankings, guess what?
Identical.
Houston, Purdue, Connecticut, Arizona, which makes sense, right? The best teams that have played the best have the best advanced stats. Like,
It's just interesting, I think, to note that the 4 are the same in both. The rankings are different with 1 through 4. And KenPom, Houston's 1 right now, and in the seeding of the conference seed or the tournament seeding, Connecticut is 1.
right.
So that's kind of just an interesting juxtaposition. And I think UConn won it all last year, and you pointed out that they were ranked pretty highly within KenPom. And they were most people I think would have considered them a sleeper coming into the tournament last year. UConn, they were a 4 seed. I don't remember the last time a 4 seed won the tournament. It's been a while.
Yeah,
not a surprise this year.
definitely. So I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to these things. Like I follow these KenPom rankings and like how teams kind of jockey around. And like last year, UConn was one of the best teams early in the year, and then they went through a spell of like, I don't know, like a month where they were losing to they were losing to some not so great teams, and like it was just ugly. It's like they lost their identity, and then it's like someone snapped their fingers, something clicked, and then they just turned it on. And guess what? Guess who was the number 1 KenPom team last year? Connecticut. So they obviously over the course of the season were the best team. And obviously, like, so you look at the KenPom rankings, and right, it's supposed to be predictive, like who's the best team. But as you play well and beat good teams, like even in the tournament, obviously then your KenPom ranking goes up. So like if I was the 10th ranked team in KenPom to start the tournament, and I win the tournament, obviously to win the tournament you have to beat really good teams, and beating really good teams means that your KenPom ranking is going to continue to go up. So it's one of those things that you have to be a little careful with, like, well, yeah, they finished number 1. Well, no kidding. They won every tournament game, I think, by 10 points or something like that. So of course they're going to end up. But if you looked at them to start the tournament, they were top 5, even as a 4 seed in the KenPom ranking. So it's, they did move up, but they were also a very, very, very good 4 seed historically. So you did see some people in their brackets, they had UConn to win it as a 4 seed because the talent was there. Like you could see that when they put it together, they were good enough to win it. But who else on here? So North Carolina's sort of been up and down. They're projected as the top 2 seed. I don't know. You got RJ Davis, who's I think a senior, and Baycott. So like they could definitely make some noise. Tennessee's another one. If you remember last year, they made the Sweet 16, and then I can't remember who they lost. I think they lost to Florida Atlantic, but Zakai Ziegler went down shortly before the tournament last year. He's one of their guards. And you could see that they just went cold on the offensive end. They would play good defense against everyone. Like they'd hold teams down for the most part, but they'd go in lulls where they couldn't score. This year with Ziegler back, he's kind of more of a facilitator, and then they got that Connect, who's a bigger guard that was a transfer. So they're a team definitely to watch out for as a 2 seed, just because they can score. Like they don't struggle to score as much as they did last year, and then the defense is still there as well.
Last year's Final Four was ridiculous. FAU, Miami, UConn, and San Diego State.
Yeah.
I mean,
so what was the
yeah.
seeds? It was 1, 9, 4, 5. Or no.
It was, let's see. So Florida Atlantic was a 9, San Diego State was a 5, UConn was a 4, and Miami was a 5.
Yeah. Well, 5, 5, 5, 5, 4,
So-
4, 4. It sounds like coffee talk on
Yeah,
SNL.
But NILs were effective last year, right? Were they in effect last year?
I think so.
So like that is fucking crazy. Like, and I know it's a year old, right? So it's not new news, but Jesus, like, none of those teams. I mean, no, UConn is a historically great basketball program, but none of the other ones are even close. Like not San Diego State, not Miami, Florida, like not, and FAU. Nobody even, who the hell even knew what FAU was before last year's tournament? I mean, whoa, weird.
And if you think like, again, I'm kind of a nerd, like who remembers these things, but
I forgot about
round 1 last year, Florida Atlantic played, do you remember?
No, they must have, no.
Memphis.
Oh,
And Memphis
it's an 8-9 matchup, yeah.
had that game. Like, I forget how it played out. It was back and forth.
They won by 1 point.
It was back and forth in the last minute. But there was like, I don't think it was controversial, but like, I forget what happened. Like they lost, they like dribbled the ball away or something weird happened. Like Florida Atlantic was very, very lucky to win that game. And then look what they do. They go all the way to the Final Four.
That's right. And also, and I forgot about this too, Purdue was the #1 overall seed and they were upset by Fairleigh Dickinson.
No.
Yes.
No, because they lost to
Purdue last year. Purdue lost to Fairleigh Dick. I forgot about that.
I don't think that's right.
I think it is.
Because I was watching. Got to do some research.
Up to date, up to the minute, just in time research.
Yeah, they lost to Ohio State in the. Or no, that's February. That was recent.
Yeah. I forgot. Because that was only the second time it had happened. I completely forgot that they got bounced by Fairleigh Dickinson this year.
That.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I completely forgot about that because that was a historic loss.
That like, it must have been. Was it 2 years ago when they lost in the?
I mean, they've been relevant for the last, like we said, 5 years. So they've had a lot of pretty shitty tournament losses.
Oh yeah, man, that's crazy.
Yeah,
that escaped
totally.
Like all the things I do remember, and I forgot about
I forgot about it. I forgot about it. I was watching that game. I remember looking at. Oh, dude, the tournament is great. It's the best sporting event in the world. There's nothing better. There's nothing better. There's nothing more exciting. Oh, it's the best.
Actually. Well, whatever. I'm not gonna look that up. But I was remembering 2 years ago, and I can't believe I forgot that. But now that I remember, Fairleigh Dickinson.
I mean, that's what the brackets were so weird.
They gave FAU a run too.
They did, yes. I mean, they lost by 8 points, but still.
They led for a good amount of like the first
game.
half, and I think they even led a little bit in the second half. So yeah, that was
game.
Crazy.
It's a great tournament last year. Great tournament.
Yeah. I do a seed contest where like there's 8 of us who get in, and you just like you pick teams, and then if your team wins, you get the amount of points of their seed. So you basically draft teams, and obviously no one picked Fairleigh Dickinson because no one expected them to win. But the person who ended up getting them as like their whatever second to last pick of the whole thing then got 16 points and almost got 32 points. So it's a fun contest just because even if you feel like you're the expert of all experts on this stuff, like it's still tough to win. So it's kind of I don't know, like evens the playing field, I guess I'll say. But yeah, that is crazy that just kind of escaped my mind.
So, the first time a 16 seed upset a one was Virginia.
UMBC, yeah.
Yeah, and that was several years ago. And then the following year, Virginia came back and won the whole thing. And they had a very exciting game against Purdue. Does Purdue win the whole thing now?
No,
Based on that one factoid.
if I had to pick a team,
Yeah, so do you want to do that? Like, do you want to talk about like who you think, or like, do you want to look at?
I mean, I think it's going to be UConn or Houston,
Yeah,
and I'm
I
not
like
going out
Houston
on
right
a
now.
whim because
No.
those are the top two Ken Pound teams, but like they just seem like they're the most
Yeah.
consistent, and
Yeah,
Houston always seems to just.
Sampson's another really good coach.
Well, I mean, they've been great.
He's been good everywhere he's been.
They've been great like the last 5
Yeah.
years or more, and they've always.
Yeah.
It seems like they make the Sweet 16 most of those years, but they just haven't been able to get over the hump. So maybe this is the year that they do it.
Oh.
I'm not sure.
I like those two teams too. I don't have faith in Purdue.
Yeah, I mean, until they do it, you
Yeah.
kind of don't. Although I did have faith in Virginia. I always thought that they were going to make a run, and I think I filled out 2 brackets that year, and I had them winning it in one of them. Which, oh great, they were one of the best teams. Obviously, they were a 1 seed. Good for you, but I don't know, like teams that are like not 1 or 2 seeds that could make a run. Obviously, I already mentioned
This is
Auburn.
last year's.
I already
Yeah.
mentioned Auburn. I don't know.
Tennessee?
Like definitely Tennessee.
Like,
I could see that
Yeah.
just because
Yeah.
I think they made the Sweet 16 last year. Like I said,
Yeah.
their offense is playing better and defensively they're very good. So they're 21st in the country offensive efficiency and 5th in the country defensive efficiency, which is very good overall. And I mentioned Creighton. They made it to, was it the Elite Eight, and San Diego State beat them by like a point last
Mhm.
year. So I mean, they have the experience. They're very solid.
Illinois.
They just lost last night to
Yeah, by
Penn
1
State.
point. Yeah, on the road. I was on the road, I think. But yeah.
Illinois is another team. They're kind of like Purdue for me. Like until they actually prove it, like
It's a very weak tournament team.
yeah,
consistently,
I just
year
like
after year.
you can't trust them, in my opinion.
There's no. It's like Illinois. No matter how many games they play, it seems like they're always just raw talent, and it's just never. There's no cohesion. There's no attempt to unify and see that talent work in concert. Like it's just they're so fucking sloppy. Like I tuned into that game last night, and it's just like they were up by 7, and it was just a disaster. They looked completely clueless. Like, and then they ended up losing that game. There's no cohesion there.
Yeah,
They can't handle stress very well. I think that's the byproduct of having a red ass coach yell at you all the time, probably.
I
Crumble
agree.
under the stress. Sure.
Yeah. Another interesting story is like, speaking of a red ass coach yelling all the time, like UCLA,
Oh,
they are
Cronin?
not even close. Like they're gonna need to win the Pac-12 tournament to make it this year. They're like about 500, which is kind of crazy. Like,
Dude.
what? How can the talent level fall off enough for you to drop that far when you? I mean, they made the Final Four, and then I think they made
2
the
years
Sweet
ago?
16
Yeah.
recently too. I mean, they're 91 in the Ken Pom. They're 14-12, and they're, like I said, they have to win the Pac-12 tournament. Like they're not
Mhm.
making the tournament, which is crazy to me. Another team that could make a run, who always seems to make a little bit of a run, is Michigan State. They're projected a 7 seed, but they're 16th overall in the Ken Pom ranking. So
I mean, Michigan State, Jesus. I mean, Izzo was a Final Four warrior, but
and you look at their guard play. So they've got Walker and Hogard, who I think are both seniors, and they both. So last year, Michigan State, they won a game. They might have won 2 games. I'm not sure. But they played that thriller with Kansas State where it was back and forth. It was like 1 possession game for almost the entire game, and it was just like what you think of as like a Sweet 16 game where 2 teams are very evenly matched and just going back and forth at each other. and they ended up losing to Kansas State last year. But so you can never count them out. I'm kind of interested to see if Marquette is actually going to win a couple games. Like they just keep losing early in the tournament lately. You got Shaka Smart there to see how they do.
And you've got some guys with coaches with some hardware on this list in the top, at least top 15. Baylor got a ring. Kansas has got a ring. Nobody else though. Oh, the Connecticut. They won last year. Yeah, nobody else in the list.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know. It just really seems like you're gonna get a Houston or a UConn winning it all. The latest one I saw, it had Houston and UConn on the same side of the bracket.
So Final Four matchup.
Yeah, which I mean, I get it. Purdue's very good. Arizona's very good. So like, you have to play the best teams at some point. But to me, it just seems like Houston and UConn are the two best teams. So I'd like to see them on opposite sides of the bracket.
Makes sense. Yep.
We'll see how it shakes out.
Yeah.
And then San Diego State is 20-7 again, and they've got experience, and they made the national championship game.
Yep.
So,
As a 5 or they were a low seed. Yeah, I mean, good tournament, and so that's where they're kind of projected out right now too, as a 5 seed.
Yeah. All right.
Dangerous.
Well, I mean, I don't know what else to say for the first smorgasbord March Madness podcast, but we talked about the bubble a little bit, a little bracketology, a little, who are the favorites to win it. Maybe next week we'll try to come up with like a specific, I guess, agenda for the discussion. I mean, the bubble changes so much within a week. Guys get injured, some teams ascend, some teams drop out. So that's always kind of a good starting point. And if you're watching this, let us know if you have any suggestions on what you want us to talk about. Go out to bracketmatrix.com, check, where teams are seated out there as far as bracketology is concerned. What else? I can't say go Vikings. There's no Vikings that are going to win the national championship.
Go Ramblers.
Oh, yeah. This guy went to Loyola. So the Ramblers they're rumbling, making a little noise.
A little bit, little A10 noise. They're second right now still.
Second in the A10. Yeah, so if the Ramblers make it,
they got to win that
tournament. Look out. Where are they at here?
No, nowhere. I mean, they're on, I think, 100 maybe, 114. Yeah.
Well, exactly. Right at 100 in the Ken Palm rankings, which, I mean.
19-7, they'll probably get to 20 wins. So it's the A10. I don't think A10 is a 2-bid league. I don't believe. Loyola's going to have to win that tournament to get it.
Another thing just to mention real quickly, you've always got these teams that have in these bad conferences or not so great conferences that have a lot of wins and they have a lot of experience and they come in, they're not so great overall, like in like the Ken Palm rankings or anything like that, but they come in with a lot of experience and they always seem to play tough. So if South Florida makes it out of the American somehow, they're 20-5. Got Appalachian State in the Sun Belt. They're 22-5. So teams like that, there's always a couple of those that are tough outs that you don't really want to play. High Point in the Big South, they're 22-6. Vermont's 21-6. So those teams, I mean, it's always fun to watch those teams. And if you're like a 3 through 5 seed, you're just crossing your fingers. I think that you don't want to see those teams with all that experience and just like play the game the right way. Don't get down on themselves. It's like you want to play the young team that kind of overachieved a little bit, or like the not so great team from a good conference, I think is who you'd rather draw if you're sitting as a 3 through 5 seed. But yeah, we'll see how it all shakes out. We'll be back hopefully next Thursday to give you another hour of March Madness randomness. So we'll say go Ramblers for now.
Go Ramblers.
There's games on every day. That's the beauty
Watch
of college basketball. There's never a day without one. So it's not like the NFL where you got to have 3 days in the week where there's no football. Okay. All right. Peace.
See ya.